I'm going to bring in Nick and then Andrew, and I know a couple of members do have to step out to be in the chamber shortly, so please don't take it as any form of offence, Nick.
Thank you for what you've said. It's been really interesting, and some of this has already been covered anyway, but this one's particularly for Dr. Summer. It's the lower social-economic backgrounds of individuals. What are your thoughts on the increased absent rates of children going to school there?
Thank you. I mean, we have identified very specific cost-related barriers that act as a disincentive for particularly children on lower incomes to go into school. And those are issues like uniform costs, transport costs, costs of special occasions and dressing up days. So lots of pupils have spoken to us about, so for example, on uniform, various issues that they identify as very kind of specific barriers. If they can only afford one uniform, then if their uniform isn't clean or isn't dry, that's a disincentive to going to school. If there are, I mean, there is kind of recent changes to the rules around uniform. So there's encouraging schools to kind of have fewer branded items, be able to go to different school suppliers, which I think we would really endorse, because forcing parents to go to one particular supplier or having lots of expensive branded items can mean that parents struggle to meet the cost of uniform, or perhaps just have one set of uniform, and then it becomes problematic for children. I think things like special occasions, dressing up days, pyjama day, or World Book Day, things that are supposed to be fun for children and can be fun for lots of children. For low-income children, there can be lots of extra costs incurred that then act as a disincentive to actually going to school on that day. We heard from children who told us that for a kind of specific day, lots of people would buy a kind of costume from Amazon, and that would be about £20. So if you can't then participate in that, it's a disincentive to going to school. So those are kind of some of the kind of things. I mean, transport in lots of areas, particularly in more rural areas, if there are problems around transport and transport costs, that's a big barrier for children to overcome. And some children told us that, particularly on the day that benefits are paid, before those benefits are paid, it's very difficult for them to get the early bus if there isn't kind of cash in their parents' account early enough. So I think it's a kind of, there can be ongoing problems. There are also rules around kind of things like punctuality policies that children told us make it harder for them to go to school. For example, if a bus is late, if they have responsibility for getting younger children to school, perhaps have some caring responsibilities. Some children told us that kind of organisations and policies around lateness, they said that they get the same sanction if you're 5 minutes late than if you're an hour late. So that's a kind of disincentive for children to make it in on time.
I mean, you told me lots of different things, and I'm sure that all of them are, but surely there's a bigger issue that children not wanting to school, because maybe the parents don't see the value of education. Do you think it is school uniform, transport, dressing up day that's actually stopping kids going to school, or do you think there's a bigger issue that we really ought to be looking at, which is parents don't see the value, or a lot of parents don't see the value of school. School never did me any good. Never did. So, do you think that's more of an issue, or are we just trying to pick off little things here that are not really barriers, but?
We've never seen any evidence that parents on low incomes value education for their children any less than anyone else. I mean, a lot of our evidence, all our evidence, is going from talking to children in schools and identifying very specific policies that schools can change, schools have absolute power over. So, for example, with things like uniform, it's a big incentive for that child that day. With things like kind of fundraising policies, if a child knows that that day is a kind of fundraising day for a charity, for example, and everyone's asked to bring in £1, if they don't have that £1, it's a big disincentive for them to go in. So we're trying to see it from the child's perspective as to what school-related factors could try and remove barriers to children feeling less inclined to go to school.
We could go on with this. I mean, school uniform is probably one of the best things that I think a school can have, though. And just because, I mean, I think we need to help that child, obviously, but I mean, making school uniforms not uniform, as it were, I think that's probably a disincentive to 99% of the children out there. I mean, it's a good thing to feel part of a school, and a uniform does that. I mean, having fun days, I can see why we could remove those if you think that that's a barrier, but I think playing with school uniforms, and I think that's a really important part of being in school, being in community, being together, bringing people so they feel part of one. So I think we need to be careful with that, don't we?
Well, I think we'd absolutely agree with you. We're big fans of school uniform. I think school uniform is one of the great levelers, absolutely. I think it's, we wouldn't one moment say do away with school uniform. I think our point is to make it kind of cheaper, to get rid of branded items. A lot of the schools we've worked in have very, very good second-hand pre-loved uniform provision. And a lot of schools we work with didn't portray it as a kind of poverty alleviation measure. They portrayed it as a kind of sustainability initiative. That, you know, 10,000 pairs of grey trousers going into landfill every year is crazy from a whole kind of range of perspectives. So there are lots of things that schools can do, particularly around uniform, that would encourage children to come in uniform. There are uniform swaps. Often actually PTAs can be involved in kind of sorting out uniform. You know, you grow out of it, you drop it at school, it can be reused.
So it's a very and just on the World Book Day, I remember visiting. I think it was a school in your neck of the woods, Ian, where they were making masks for the children for World Book Day instead of having the costumes, because they were saying that was more inclusive and it didn't create that divide and the buying of Amazon costumes. So I think there are ways of engaging with these things, aren't there? If the schools want to remove some of those barriers, which it's important that they
there are
address. Absolutely.
I mean, as you say, absolutely. You know, giving children a T-shirt to decorate or bringing in a book. I mean, I think similarly with things like school trips. Even with residential trips, we came across some excellent practice. Actually, schools we were working in just post-COVID or during the pandemic, schools, a primary school where normally the Year 6 children would go to a kind of activity centre, usually cost about £400, because they couldn't do that because of COVID. They invited the Year 6s into the school for the weekend. They slept in the hall, they had activities on the field, they had, you know, archery and climbing and things. And it was a tiny fraction of the price. And I would argue it's a similar experience really for the children. It's just as fun. So I think looking for ways to reduce very specific cost barriers. I think also it's very important for all parents to know who they can go to in the school if they are concerned about cost barriers to their child participating in any aspect of school, be that food, uniform, trips, curriculum. If parents know there's a point of contact that they can be in touch with and seek support without judgment, I think that can be very helpful for parents.
Okay,